Welcome to the Contract Express webinar, session 5. Today's topic will be on connections with Contract Express. During this session, we will focus on the key scenarios around lookup tables, external tables, document management systems, and electronic signatures. Over to you, Rhiannon.
Thanks, Nick. So the first thing that I'm going to take you through in today's session is external tables and lookup tables. So what are external tables? Well, they allow you to reference information that is stored somewhere. There are a few different sources of information you can use. They include SQL tables, SharePoint lists, and OData sources, as well as data sheets from Contract Express. So first of all, how do you set these up? This takes place under the Admin tab. And if I scroll down, to external tables under data management. As you can see, I've got one external table already set up here, which is this customers external table. If I wanted to set up a brand new table, I would click add external table on the right hand side. And this is where I can add in all of the parameters. Now, the parameters that you need to fill in here will depend on what kind of data source you're using. So this is for SQL tables, but if I select one of the other options in here, I'll be asked for slightly different information. If you want to know specifically what information you need for your specific data source, we have a list in the admin manual, so I suggest having a look in there. I'm not going to show you in this session setting up each one of these because the setup is very similar and most of the parameters that you need to enter are fairly self-explanatory. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my customers one that I've already set up and show you what this looks like. So this is what it will look like once you've set up. This one is for a SQL table, but it's fairly similar for the other kinds as well. Once you've set it up, the last thing you'll want to do is click the test connection button, and you should get a message saying it's successfully connected to the external table. If that doesn't show up, then you know something's wrong with the connection. If you've got an external table set up on one site and you want to transfer it to another one, for instance, if you've got a dev and a prod site and you want to have the same table on both, you can also use the download external table button. You'll have a XML file downloaded and you can then re-upload that onto a different site and it will just replicate the same external table. So you can do that using the upload external table button here. The next thing that you need to do once you've set up your external table is to share it with users. You can do that via the sharing button over here. And as you can see, this is very similar to the sharing on a template basis or on a document basis. So you can share in 3 ways: by specific user, by group, or by role. And for each one of those, you would select relevant one, pop in the group or the user, and also select the access level. So there are 3 main access levels: read, write, and full. None is generally used to restrict access. In order to retrieve data from an external table, for instance, if your external table is used in a questionnaire, you would need to have a minimum of read access. Write access will also allow you to edit the external table definition. And then full access will additionally enable you to edit the user access, so to share it with additional people or remove access to users that already have access to the external table. So once you've set up your sharing on this, you can click Save, and that's your table set up. The next stage is actually using this external table. So what I'm going to do is show you an example. I've got a template that I've already got set up, this non-disclosure agreement template here. And this template is going to use the information from my external table. So the customer's external table that I've got set up is just a SQL table that's got some information about existing customers in it. So if I generate a new document and I choose that non-disclosure agreement template, I'm going to launch a questionnaire here. And this is just a simple NDA template, but it's got a question asking, is this agreement for an existing customer? So if I select yes, I have an additional question that's asking me for the name of the customer. And this is where I'm using the external table information. I can pop in something in here, and depending on what I type, I'm getting a searchable list. This information in the searchable list is coming through from that external table. So it's just the existing customers that we've got information on in that SQL table. If I select one of these customers, I'm going to get the corresponding address information, which is also being pulled through from that external table. And those bits of information are being included into my generated document here. So that's what it looks like on the actual questionnaire side. But what does this actually look like in the template itself? Well, if I go to the template and I look in my dictionary here, the existing customer information is in this group on the questionnaire here. So my other party name variable is that searchable list that I was just looking at. For this one, I have a text selection variable, and the presentation is set to searchable list. Now, note that searchable lists are only possible where you are using external tables. So that's quite a nice reason you might want to use one, especially if you've got information on things like customers or anything really already in a SQL table somewhere. Under the constraints, rather than having to type in each of those individually, what I'm actually doing is just pulling through my information from my external table. And I do that using this select statement here. So all I'm saying is select customer name from customers. And here, customer name is a column in my SQL table. And then customers is the name of that SQL table. So the name here is just the name that I set up when I was creating that external table under the admin settings on my site. So that is where I'm choosing the name of my customer, my existing customer. I then also have a bunch of computable variables for different things like parts of the address and things like that. In each of these, if I look at the computation, I've got a similar select statement here. This is saying select customer address 1 from customers, where customer name is other party name. So all this is saying is look into my SQL table, my external table, find the column for the first line of the address from that customer table, and then match up the customer name column according to which customer I've chosen in that other party name variable. So essentially, we're just choosing the name of the party from our list of customers and then bringing through the corresponding bits of the address. So here, the first line of the address, here the city, and for each of these, we're just pulling through a slightly different bit according to which column of that SQL table, that external table we're looking at. So that's how you use your external tables. We also have another feature in Contract Express called Lookup Tables. And the difference between external tables and lookup tables is simply where the information is stored. So external tables are information stored externally, for example, in a SQL table, whereas lookup tables are where you're creating a table and you're storing that information inside your templates. So if I go over here to my lookup tables section of the questionnaire, you can see I've got several lookup tables that I've created inside this template. So this one in particular is information on Corboda entities. And for each one of these, I've got different columns with the name in full, a description, and various other bits of information. This is going to be used in a very similar way in my template to how I was using the information from external tables. The difference is mainly that this is stored inside the template itself. So if I go back to my questionnaire again, my first question on the questionnaire is this Corboda company variable, and that's where I'm choosing which Corboda region is responsible for the agreement. So again, this is a text selection variable. And if I look under the constraints, this time I have a select statement again, and it's saying select Corboda name short. Now this Corboda name short is just the name of a column in that lookup table that I was just looking at. Here it's very similar to the way that you refer to external tables, but I don't actually need to refer to the name of the external table because this is a lookup table that's inside this template. But otherwise it's the same idea. You're saying select the name of a column. Likewise, I also have some other bits of information that I'm pulling through. So for instance, here I've got my Corboda description. And if I find that variable in my questionnaire, this is a computation, and I'm doing something very similar again here to what I did with the external tables. I'm saying select the description, and again, this is a column in my lookup table where the name that I've chosen corresponds to that variable Corboda company. So essentially, give me the description that matches what I've entered on the questionnaire. So that's your lookup table. And as I say, the only main difference is where you're storing the information. So the lookup table is storing information in your particular template, and the external table is storing it somewhere externally, for example, in a SQL table, it might be a SharePoint list, whatever your external table is set up as the data source. The other difference, and I did mention this a little while ago as well, is that the searchable list, like we've got on this questionnaire here, this kind of search is only possible with external tables, and it's not possible with lookup tables. So you might want to use external tables either for maintenance purposes. It can be easier if you've already got a SQL table with information stored somewhere, and also to aid a bit nicer questionnaire filling out where you are enabling this kind of searchable list. So that's your external tables and your lookup tables. The next topic that I want to take you through is connecting to document management systems. So Contract Express allows you to export generated documents to various document management systems, including NetDocuments, iManage, SharePoint Online, and also HighQ. So there are a couple of stages here. Firstly, you need to set up the connection on your license space. And there are a few steps to this, which depend slightly on which DMS you're connecting to. So if I go to the admin settings, if you look on the left under integrations and connection settings, this is where you would set up your connection. Now there is a step that you need to do before this, which is in the DMS itself. There is a little bit of setup on that side. It does depend slightly on which DMS you're connecting to. If you want specific instructions according to which DMS, on our knowledge base, we have a very handy quick guide for each one. So it's worth taking a look at that, and that will give you step-by-step instructions. The second step is the Contract Express side configuration, and that's what I'm going to run through now. So to add a new connection, you would click Add Connection on the right-hand side here. And depending on which integration type you select, so from the list here, you would be asked for different bits of information here. So for example, if I pick HighQ, I would need to fill out these sections here. And the client ID and the client secret are going to come from the DMS side. So that's why you need to do a little bit of setup on that side before you get to this stage. I'm not going to go through setting up each one of these because, as I say, it does tend to be fairly self-explanatory, and it does depend on which connection type you're setting up. But what I do have is a connection that I've previously set up to my HighQ instance here. So if I click into that and show you what it actually looks like, I've got my integration type of HighQ, and then I've got all of my information that I've entered in here. So this is generally what your URLs should look like. If you do get these slightly wrong, it can cause the connection to fail, so you want to make sure that you've got these exactly right. There is also an additional step for HighQ, which is this Add HighQ System Admin Access button. So you'll want to have a system admin click through here to enable the proper authentication. Once you've got this set up, you're then ready to go, and you can export your documents. So how does that actually work? Well, what I've got here is I've got some documents that I've created previously from my NDA. These are in ready status, so they're ready to export. If I go into one of those documents, I have this export button at the top. Now this won't show up if you don't have any connections to DMSs set up, but I do, so I can click export on here. I would then select the documents that I want to export. Obviously here I've only got one, but if you're generating more than one document at a time, then you might have multiple documents here, and you can then choose which ones you want to export. If I then click select location, I would select my connection here. Obviously I've only got one HighQ connection, but if you've got multiple connections set up, you'll need to pick which one. And then if I select location, I can pick the site. This is on my HighQ side, which site I want to export to. So I'm going to pick this one here. And then I can pick the folder that I want to export to as well. I'm going to pick this one at the bottom. You can also pick multiple folders here if you want to. Once I've chosen my location, I click save and save again. And I can then click export. Once you've exported your item, you'll get this successfully exported message. And if I go into my HighQ instance, just to show you what is happening on this side, if I go to my site in question, I've got all of my folders here. So if I go into the one that I exported to, you can see this NDA for WordShare Inc. down here, and that was the one that I've just exported. So this works very similarly for other DMS connections as well. So if you're exporting to iManage or Net Documents or SharePoint Online, it's a very similar process. The main thing that's different is the setup side, just because it's a slightly different information required for each one of those. With HighQ in particular, there is also another way of using the connections, and that is for bulk generation of documents. So the idea is that you can use information stored in an iSheet on HighQ to bulk generate documents from a template in Contract Express. So if I click on this iSheet up here, this is a kind of test iSheet that I've got set up. So it contains only a couple of records here. I've got one for Sally Sales and one for Annie Admin, and these are just information that I want to feed into an NDA template. So you can see I've got a column for each bit of information for each variable that's necessary in my NDA template. So what I would do on the Contract Express side is if I go back to the Documents tab, rather than clicking New Document, as I would normally do if I was generating a document, I would click on the three little dots here and then go to Import iSheet. I can then pick which HighQ connection I want to use, click Connect, and then I've got a couple of things I need to pick here. The first is which Contract Express template I want to use. Now note that these will only appear in this list if you have set the template to live. So in this case, I want to pick this one, my non-disclosure agreement for HighQ. I'm then going to pick the HighQ site and then the iSheet that I want to use. So this is my NDA Corboda test iSheet, and that's the same one that I was looking at over here. I can then pick which view I want to use. I'm going to use the default view here. If you click Check Mapping, you can check that the mapping between the variables on the Contract Express side and the columns on the iSheet are correct. If you've got the same names for your iSheet columns, this will kind of automatically match up and you shouldn't need to amend anything, but you can amend these if you wish. Once I'm happy, I can then click Import, and you can see I've successfully created two documents. These won't actually update the names until you click into them. So you can see now I've clicked into this. This one is an NDA for Annie Admin, and this one here is one for Sally Sales. So those correspond to the information in these two rows here of my iSheet. And if I actually go into the questionnaire for one of these, you'll be able to see that the information has been entered into my questionnaire from the information in those columns. The reason it's coming up as incomplete is just because I don't have all of those bits of information in my iSheet. So that's how you would bulk generate documents using your HighQ iSheets. Generally, if you were doing this, you'd be sort of creating more than two at a time, but this is just an example to show you how it works. So that's your DMS connections. Once you've got it set up, it's pretty simple, and it just does depend a little bit on which DMS you're connecting to. The last topic that I want to take you through is the using of e-signature. So currently Contract Express supports Docusign and Adobe Sign when it comes to e-signatures. These do need to be turned on a license space level. So an admin can go to the admin settings in order to do that. If I go to Features and scroll down, you'll need to make sure that e-signature is ticked here, and then you can choose either Docusign or Adobe Sign according to which one you want to use. Make sure you remember to scroll back up and click Save to retain those changes. Once e-signature has been enabled at the license space level, you can configure it at the template level. So if you go to Templates tab and then you select a particular template, if I scroll down on the left-hand side, we have this e-signature section. And I can either choose to use Docusign, or if I want to, I can disable Docusign for that particular template. So you might want to do that if you've got a particular template that is only being used as a first draft and you don't want it to be sent out for signature. It might be a little bit confusing to people to have that option. You can also enable Docusign for guests if you do have guest access and you've set your template to public. Again, you want to make sure you save any changes on here. So once you have e-signature enabled and you have a template set up with it, if you generate a document, once that document reaches ready status, you'll be able to send it for signature. So if I go down to this NDA here that I've created previously, you'll see that I've got the Start Docusign button in the middle here. So to send it for e-signature, I would click Start Docusign. And this will bring me through to Docusign. The first time you do this, you might have to log in and you will have to have a Docusign account already to do that. So once I'm in Docusign, I can just go ahead and add in my recipients as I would normally. And then I can add in my signature boxes and everything like that. And this works exactly the same as you would normally do in Docusign because we've just been taken straight into the Docusign side here. Once I'm ready, I can click Send. That will send my document for signature and it will take me back into Contract Express. And you'll see that in Contract Express, my status has now been changed from ready to sent for signature. If I want to void that, if I realize I've made a mistake, I can void Docusign and that will change the status back again. The person who is the person who needs to sign will obviously get the email as they would usually from Docusign. Obviously here, that's just me. I can go in and sign it again exactly as you would normally. So I've now signed that. And that would just work exactly as it normally would if you were sending a document for signature directly through Docusign. If I then go back into Contract Express and I reload this page, you'll see the status has now changed to executed. And we've also got two documents down here. One is the draft document. So this is the document that came out after we filled out the questionnaire from Contract Express. And then we've got the signed document. So this is a PDF, and this is the signed document that we've got back from Docusign. So both of these will now be under the document tab in Contract Express. This does work very similarly for Adobe Sign as well. The only difference really is that you're using Adobe Sign rather than Docusign. So obviously the bits on the kind of other end will be slightly different. But that's your e-signature. It's very simple. There's basically two parts, just setting it up on the admin side. And then once you've generated your documents, it's a simple matter of sending it to either Adobe Sign or Docusign. And then once it's signed, you get your executed version back into Contract Express.